Wesley Grant's boots crunched against the gravel as he stepped down from the truck, dust billowing around him like smoke from a fire he hadn't started. The road behind him stretched for miles, empty and sun-baked. This was supposed to be his clean slate, a quiet place, a place to disappear from the chaos of a life that never quite fit. The house stood ahead, old but solid, wrapped in the kind of silence that never felt empty. Just waiting. He squinted at the front porch, shielding his eyes from the late afternoon sun. That's when he saw them. If you're a true Wild West soul, drop a big yes in the comments. Let's see who's still riding the trail with us. 3 women, already there, already watching. They didn't move, didn't speak, just stood like statues carved from shadow and heat. The tallest one leaned against the railing with casual command, arms folded across her chest like she'd been expecting him for hours. The others flanked her, one auburn-haired and smirking, the other dark and unreadable. Her expression the kind that makes you check your pockets for a weapon you don't have. Wesley glanced at the deed in his hand. Still there, still real. The notary seal shimmered faintly in the light. He took a breath, slid the paper back into his jacket, and approached. "Afternoon," he said, keeping his voice even. "I believe this is my property now." The tall woman didn't smile, not exactly. Her lips curled like she remembered how. "You believe that," she said. The other 2 exchanged a glance. Nothing obvious. Just a twitch of the eyebrow, a tilt of the chin. Communication without words. Wesley had the sudden, sharp awareness that he wasn't the one in control of this conversation, maybe not even of this situation. "I have the deed," he said, holding his ground. "We know," the auburn-haired one said, her voice like honey that hadn't decided if it was sweet or poisonous. "We saw it. How—" "You're late," the dark-haired woman interrupted. "He said you'd be here yesterday." Wesley blinked. "Who?" But the question hung in the air, unanswered. The tall one stepped down from the porch slowly, deliberately, her shadow stretching across the dust to reach him before her boots did. "You've come all this way," she said, stopping close, closer than comfort allowed. "No neighbors. No backup. No one who'll come looking." Wesley didn't flinch, but something cold moved through his spine. "You planning to run us off?" she asked. "No," he said. "I'm planning to live here." Her eyes narrowed just enough. "Good." She reached out, not threatening, but final. Her hand grazed the front of his shirt, fingers just brushing fabric. "Then you'd better get inside," she said. "It's time we talk about the arrangement." Wesley stared at her, heart drumming behind his ribs. The auburn-haired one laughed behind him. "You're going to have sex with us," she said. And this time no one was smiling. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and something faintly floral, lavender maybe, or something older. The floorboards creaked beneath Wesley's steps, not from disrepair, but from weight, like the house itself was settling around him. The living room was neat, rustic, lived in. No dust, no cobwebs. Someone had just made tea. The women followed him in without speaking. He heard their footsteps, slow, deliberate, heavy enough to shake something loose in his chest. He turned toward them, already halfway to asking what exactly was going on, when the tall one motioned to the couch. "Sit." He sat. She stood across from him, arms crossed. The other 2 flanked her again, one leaning on the kitchen doorframe, the other standing near the fireplace like a sentinel. Their presence filled the space. Not just because of their size, though they were tall, all 3 of them easily over 6 feet, but because of the way they occupied the room, like furniture, and air had made space for them, and only them. "I'm Astrid," the tall one said. "This is Freya." She nodded toward the auburn-haired woman. "And Bruna." The one with the dark eyes said nothing. Wesley cleared his throat. "Nice to meet you. "We know who you are," Astrid said. Freya smiled then. not kindly, more like she'd just remembered something amusing that didn't bode well for him. Astrid stepped forward. You bought this place, which means you've inherited certain obligations. I bought the land, Wesley said, suddenly wishing he hadn't sat down. I didn't inherit anything. Just what's in the deed. Astrid looked at Freya. Freya looked at Bruna. Bruna said nothing. You think this is funny? Astrid asked. Wesley raised both hands slightly. I think this is confusing. Freya's smirk widened. She pushed off the doorframe and walked toward him, hips swaying with casual, predatory rhythm. You're going to have sex with us, she said, voice light as silk. Wesley blinked, then snorted, then laughed, nervous, tight, and far too loud. That's a good one, he said. Okay, so what's really going on? No one else laughed. Astrid didn't even blink. Bruna finally moved, crossing her arms in perfect sync with Astrid. Freya stood over him now, close enough that he could see the faint scar under her jaw and the way her eyes didn't blink in rhythm with his. It wasn't a joke, Astrid said. Wesley's smile faded, replaced by something colder, tighter. Look, he said, whatever this is, whatever you think the last guy promised, he didn't promise, Astrid interrupted. He agreed, and then he ran. Bruna's voice came from behind him, deep and low. You won't. Wesley stood slowly. The room felt smaller than before, too warm, too quiet. You don't get to decide that, he said, though his voice betrayed the fact he wasn't sure. Astrid stepped forward. We already have. Astrid didn't break eye contact as she reached into a drawer near the fireplace and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Not a copy, not something printed off a cheap office printer. Thick stock, cream-colored, edges worn by handling. She unfolded it slowly, like a ritual she'd performed before, and handed it to Wesley without a word. He hesitated, then took it. His eyes scanned the page. The header matched the deed. Same notary seal, same handwriting. But this wasn't the document he'd reviewed before wiring over his life savings. This was something else entirely. Wesley's stomach tightened as he read. The undersigned, Marcus Vance, agrees to transfer all obligations, both material and relational, to the incoming owner upon sale of property known as Parcel 17B, White Hollow Ridge. This includes all household arrangements and shared responsibilities as previously agreed upon. His eyes jumped further down the page. With cohabitants Astrid, Freya, and Bruna. Terms of co-residency, physical partnership, and continued communal effort are to be honored in full spirit, intent, and action. What the hell is this? Wesley asked, voice hoarse. Astrid didn't move. The real contract. There was nothing like this in the packet I got. There wouldn't be, Freya said. Not unless Marcus wanted you to see it, which clearly he didn't. Wesley shook his head, reading it again, as if he'd missed something. This isn't legally binding. This is insane. It's notarized, Bruna said, her voice quiet but pointed. It's attached to the land deed in the county office. You bought all of it. I bought land, Wesley snapped. I didn't agree to sleep with 3 strangers. Astrid raised an eyebrow. Did you read every page before signing? His silence answered her. You trusted Marcus, Freya added. That was your first mistake. Wesley stepped back, holding the paper like it might burn. Even if this is real, no one can force me into... No one's forcing you, Astrid cut in. You can leave. Anytime. The quiet that followed made his skin crawl. Only, Freya said, moving closer again, that would mean forfeiting everything you just bought, including your investment, including your name on the land. Wesley looked at the paper again. It stared back, as final and smug as the signature at the bottom, Marcus Vance. He folded it slowly, gritted his teeth, You're telling me he signed me up to be, what, a shared husband? A partner, Bruna said, more gently than he expected. Not a prisoner. Not a toy, but not a guest either. And if I say no, Astrid's eyes darkened, then you walk away with nothing, just like Marcus did. Only difference is, we won't let you walk far. The house didn't creak the way old houses usually did. It shifted, slow, deliberate, like it was listening, breathing. Wesley noticed it first when he moved down the hallway after midnight, sleep nowhere near him. The floor under his bare feet wasn't cold. It was warm, faintly pulsing, like the heat came from something deeper than pipes or wood. He paused at the end of the hall. A door behind him clicked softly shut. Though no wind had blown through, no draft stirred the air. He turned back. No one there. The walls weren't just quiet, they hummed. Low, rhythmic, like breath through stone. If he pressed his hand flat against the plaster, he could feel it, an almost imperceptible vibration, a heartbeat too slow to be his own. In the kitchen, a lantern flickered, even though he hadn't lit it. It cast strange shadows on the wall. One of them looked like a woman turning to watch him. When he blinked, it was gone. He poured himself water and tried to laugh at the unease crawling under his skin. Ghosts weren't real. Magic was a fantasy. And yet, the silence here felt aware. A soft creak made him turn. Freya stood at the threshold, hair messy from sleep, a long shawl draped over one shoulder. "Can't sleep?" she asked, voice still low from dreams. "The house," he said before he could stop himself. "It's strange." Freya crossed the room barefoot, poured herself a cup of water like she didn't notice how the lantern flared slightly when she came near. "It's not strange. It's responsive." Wesley stared at her. "Responsive." She nodded, eyes half-lidded. "It listens. It holds. It changes when we do." "That's not normal." "Neither are we," she said, and sipped from her cup. When she walked past him toward the stairs, the lantern dimmed like it exhaled. The warmth that followed her steps on the floor lingered for several seconds before fading. Left alone again, Wesley set his cup down and looked around. The walls felt closer now, not threatening, just curious, watching. He whispered under his breath, "What are you?" The floor sighed beneath him. The next morning, Bruna was already in the kitchen, her large hands kneading dough like it had wronged her. Astrid was on the porch sharpening a blade that looked more ceremonial than useful. Neither asked about his night, but both looked at him differently, like something had shifted. He ate breakfast without speaking, because now he understood. The house wasn't just shelter. It wasn't just wood and nails. It was part of them, whatever they were. And by stepping inside, by staying past the first night, by reading the contract and not running, he hadn't just bought land. He'd been invited into something alive. It was Bruna who finally told him, not Astrid with her cold authority, or Freya with her sharp smile, but Bruna, quiet, grounded Bruna, while they repaired a fence near the northern edge of the property. The late morning sun cast long shadows behind her, and Wesley noticed for the first time how hers fell heavier than it should have, like even her shadow carried weight. She handed him a post, barely grunting, as she drove another into the earth with a single swing. Wesley had to brace himself with both feet just to keep up. "You ever wonder why the soil here's so rich?" she asked, not looking at him. He hesitated. "Good weather? Isolation? Magic?" Bruna gave a low sound, half laugh, half something darker. "Magic's just rules you haven't learned yet." He watched her for a moment, sweat glinting on her shoulders. "What are you?" Her hands paused mid-motion. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. "We're what's left," she said finally, her voice soft but unshakable. of something older than this country, older than the towns that forgot us. They called us daughters of the soil, said we were born from earth and blood and bone, meant to keep land alive. And Marcus? He asked, though the name already felt cursed in his mouth. Bruna's jaw tensed. He thought it was all poetry, until it wasn't. What did he do? He lied, she said. He said he'd stay, said he'd honor the bond. He didn't. She leaned on the fence, her eyes scanning the tree line, like she might still see him running. He tried to leave? Wesley asked. Bruna didn't answer right away. When she finally spoke, it was without emotion. He ran in the middle of the night, took the money, left the land, left us. The house felt it first. The fields turned brittle. Crops failed. The spring slowed to a trickle. The land knows when it's been abandoned. And him? Her eyes turned to him then, dark, deep. Found 3 towns over, barely breathing, skin cracked like clay. He couldn't speak, couldn't drink, just dried up. Wesley swallowed. You did that? Bruna shook her head slowly. We didn't. The land did. He broke the pact. Wesley looked out at the field. Everything was alive again. The air smelled like rain, though no clouds had gathered. The fence post in his hands thudded into the earth as if the soil welcomed it. You really believe the land needs more than labor? He asked. Bruna smiled, but it wasn't kind. It doesn't want hands. It wants loyalty, flesh, bond, and yes, sometimes love. She turned back to her work like she hadn't just unraveled everything he thought he understood. And Wesley? He wasn't sure if he was building a fence or a boundary he'd never be allowed to cross. The moon hung low and swollen outside the window, casting silver light across the wooden floorboards. Wesley sat on the edge of the bed, shirt off, boots still on, heart thudding like something trapped beneath his ribs. The house was quiet, but not still. It never was. The walls breathed. The floor warmed. The air pulsed in time with something he didn't understand. He didn't hear her approach. The door creaked open, just enough for her silhouette to slip through. Freya stepped inside barefoot, wearing only a loose linen shift that hung from her shoulders like it didn't dare cling too tightly. Her hair was down, wild. Her gaze, calm but focused. He stood before he knew why. She didn't speak at first, just watched him with eyes that didn't blink nearly enough. Eyes that had seen men break and men run. Eyes that seemed to be asking him, "Are you made of more than paper and fear?" "You're not ready," she said quietly. Wesley wasn't sure if it was a question or a challenge. "I don't know what this is," he said, his voice rough with honesty. Freya walked to him, slow, deliberate, not like a predator this time, but like someone stepping into water they already know the temperature of. When she stopped in front of him, her hand came up, not grabbing, not demanding, just resting lightly against his chest. "You don't need to know," she said. "You only need to feel." He could have stepped back, could have told her no. The air around them practically begged for a decision, but he didn't move. Her hand slid down, slow, drawing heat in its wake. Not rushed, not claiming, just offering. He leaned in without thinking, breath catching when their foreheads touched. Freya's skin was warm, her presence massive, grounding, like the weight of the earth beneath bare feet. Her other hand settled against his jaw, rough with calluses, but gentle in a way that undid him more than pressure ever could. When she kissed him, it was not sweet. It was old, deep, like something she remembered from another life and wanted to teach him again. Wesley's breath hitched, and he kissed her back, slower, uncertain at first, then with need. Clothes fell away in quiet agreement. The bed creaked under their weight, but nothing about it felt rushed or transactional. There was no script, no rules, just skin, heat, and the strange, impossible feeling that he wasn't being consumed, he was becoming. Later, as Freya lay beside him, fingers tracing circles along his chest, he realized something had shifted. He wasn't just a guest anymore. And the house knew. The next morning, the air smelled like wet grass and wood smoke. The sun hadn't yet broken through the mist that clung low over the fields. Wesley found Astrid behind the barn, sharpening a spade with slow, practiced strokes. She didn't look up as he approached, didn't need to. "You slept with her," she said, voice flat. Wesley paused. "Is that a problem?" Astrid wiped the blade clean. "Only if you thought it meant nothing." He didn't respond. Not right away. Not because he didn't have an answer, but because he wasn't sure which version of it was true. She turned then, finally meeting his eyes. "This land," she said, gesturing around him, "is not like other places. It doesn't grow because we work it. It grows because we're connected to it, to each other." "I thought you were just being poetic," Wesley muttered. "I'm never poetic," she said. They stood in silence for a moment. The mist moved through the fence line like fingers dragging along a piano. The earth beneath his boots felt warmer than it should have, breathing, always breathing. "So that night with Freya, wasn't about pleasure," Astrid cut in, "though that helps. It was about bond, trust, commitment. You can't fake that and expect the crops to grow. That's a lot to put on one night. It's not just one night. It's all of them, every shared breath, every promise kept or broken. The house listens. The soil listens." Wesley ran a hand through his hair. "And what happens if the bond breaks?" Astrid looked past him, toward the fields. "Then the land turns against us. It spoils, it starves, it withholds. You think it's dramatic until the spring runs dry and your livestock won't eat, and the sky clouds but never rains." He thought of Bruna's story, of Marcus, dried up, found gasping in a town that didn't know what he'd tried to abandon. A man who made promises, then ran from them. "This wasn't in the contract," Wesley said. "No," Astrid replied, "because if you need a contract to stay, you don't belong here." She stepped closer, her presence heavier than Freya's, less forgiving. "We're not asking for obedience. We're asking for presence, for willingness, for something real." Wesley met her eyes. "And if I give it?" She tilted her head. "Then the land will give back." That night, as he walked alone through the field, the mist curling around his ankles like silk, Wesley placed a hand to the soil. Warm, soft, receptive. The wind moved through the wheat with a low, satisfied sigh. Something old. Something alive. He whispered a name, maybe Freya's, maybe Astrid's, and the land answered without words. For the first time, he believed it. This wasn't about desire. It was about survival. The man came at dusk when the sky turned copper and the wind dropped low enough to hear the flies buzzing. He stood at the fence line like he owned the horizon, dusty boots, travel-worn coat, and eyes that didn't flinch. His horse pawed at the ground restlessly. The women were already outside before Wesley even noticed. Freya stood nearest to him, her arms crossed, jaw tight. Astrid kept her distance, but her hand rested on the handle of something just out of sight. Bruna said nothing at all, but her body was angled like a wall between the stranger and the house. Wesley stepped up beside them, heart beating faster than the situation seemed to call for. "You the new owner?" the man asked. His voice was gravel and whiskey, casual but probing. "I am," Wesley said. "Can I help you?" The man gave a tight smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Name's Elias." "I knew the man who used to run this place. Marcus Vance. At the name, Wesley felt the tension thicken around him like smoke. Astrid's fingers curled tighter. Elias nodded slowly, as if confirming something for himself. He owed me some things. Never finished what he promised. Figured I'd find him here, or find answers. He's gone, Bruna said, voice cold. Ran out months ago. You sure? Elias asked. I heard different. Wesley stepped forward before anyone else could. Whatever Marcus did, it has nothing to do with me. He sold me the land. The deal's legal. Elias tilted his head, studying him. Legal don't mean clean. Freya laughed once, sharp and humorless. Neither do you. The man didn't react, but his eyes flicked toward her, then to Bruna, then to the porch behind them, measuring everything. What exactly did Marcus promise you? Wesley asked, voice calm but firm. Elias looked back at him, and for a moment, something darker passed through his gaze. A stake. A cut. Said the place was going to be profitable. Said he had partners. He let the word linger. Didn't say much about them. You're not getting anything from here, Astrid said flatly. Turn around and ride. The wind picked up, just enough to rattle the boards under the porch. Elias didn't move. His hand rested near his belt, not on a weapon, but not far from one either. Wesley could feel the choice rising in him like heat. He could ask questions, dig, push, or he could stand between these women and the man who smelled like debt and unfinished business. Whatever Marcus promised, Wesley said, stepping forward, he's not here to deliver. And I don't owe you a damn thing. Elias held his stare for a long moment. Then he clicked his tongue, turned his horse, and rode off slow, like he wasn't finished. Wesley watched him disappear into the trees. Behind him, Bruna exhaled, and the porch boards finally stopped trembling. The valley was quiet, too quiet, the kind of stillness that made birds hush and the wind forget its name. Wesley stood in the center of the lower field, bare feet in freshly turned soil, the scent of earth and smoke clinging to his skin. The sky above was deep gold, bleeding into violet. All around him, torches flickered, forming a wide circle that cut into the dusk like firelight carved into velvet. The women stood opposite him, Astrid, Freya, and Bruna, draped in fabric the color of old blood and ripened wheat. Each wore symbols painted across their arms, marks that pulsed faintly, alive with heat and meaning he didn't yet understand. He knew better than to ask what they meant. This wasn't a performance. It wasn't for him. But he had been invited to be part of it. Do you come to the land with open hands? Astrid asked, voice low and firm. Wesley nodded. I do. Do you come with an honest heart? Bruna asked, stepping closer. I do, he said again, steadier this time. Freya approached last, slower than the others, and took his hand. Her fingers were cool despite the firelight, and when she looked at him, there was something raw behind her eyes. Do you come with your body? She asked, voice like smoke drifting over a flame. Your blood, your breath, your want? Wesley swallowed. His heart beat against his ribs like it wanted to answer first. Yes, he whispered, I do. They guided him into the center of the circle, where the soil had been softened and marked. A bed of wild grass and woven linen had been laid under the open sky. The valley held its breath as Freya slid her hands up his chest, as Bruna whispered something in a language he couldn't place, and Astrid stood over him like judgment and blessing in one towering form. They touched him with purpose, not possession, not claiming, but including, bringing him in, binding him not with rope or law, but with presence, with shared heat, with breath exchanged under open stars. And when they took him, together, it wasn't lust, it was offering. It was earth, and sky and skin and yes. The fire crackled around them, and somewhere deep in the fields, The crops sighed. The land accepted him. Later, when his body trembled and the air cooled, they lay tangled in one another beneath the endless dark. Freya whispered stories against his throat. Bruna pressed her palm to his chest, feeling the rhythm match her own. Astrid stayed silent, but held his hand like she'd never let it go. In the distance, the spring began to flow again. And Wesley finally belonged. The porch creaked beneath their weight, but didn't complain. It had learned to hold them all. Wesley in the center, Freya curled against his side with a half-finished apple in one hand, Bruna sharpening a blade with rhythmic ease, and Astrid leaning back in her chair, arms folded, watching the sky like she expected it to deliver something worth knowing. The sun dripped down the horizon in slow streaks of orange and wine. The fields below shimmered, heavy with late summer growth. The cattle were fat, the grain high. The spring ran clear. Everything was alive. Wesley sipped his coffee, black, bitter, and strong, and let the moment settle over him. The wind shifted. Freya tucked her legs up beneath her. Bruna's sharpening stopped. Even Astrid smiled, just barely. 3 months. It felt like longer. The house no longer whispered at night. It sang, not loudly, just a low hum in the bones of the floorboards, the kind of sound that meant satisfaction. That meant things were in balance. The crops grew faster now. The livestock multiplied. Trade had picked up. People came from other valleys, curious, always cautious, but they left with goods and stories they didn't know how to tell. And Wesley? He was no longer the man who'd shown up with a deed and too much doubt. He didn't ask who was in charge anymore. He knew. They all were. Bruna trusted him with the numbers. Freya shared her seed plans without second-guessing. Astrid, ever the shield, let him hold her hand when the nights got too long and quiet. They hadn't forced him to fit. They'd made space, and he had filled it. He watched the sky turn from fire to ash. No city noise, no street lights, just wind, crops, and the slow breath of a house that knew its people. Astrid spoke first, voice low. "Still think about leaving?" Wesley looked out over the land, thought about cubicles, bars, hollow friendships, thought about noise and shallow sleep and pretending to want things he never asked for. "No," he said, "not once." Freya smiled against his shoulder. Bruna looked up from her blade. Astrid nodded like she'd already known. "You found something out here," Bruna said. "No," he replied. "You found me." They fell into silence again, the kind that didn't need filling. Below them the earth shifted, readying itself for night. The wind smelled like soil and lavender. The house, old and vast and still breathing, held them like a secret it had waited years to tell. 3 queens, 1 king, and not one of them ruled alone.